Okay, welcome everyone to today's show. Today we want to introduce you to Anthony Dinobile, who is a nutritionist, healer, and pastry chef. Great titles right there, all in one. So even though Anthony's original career path began as an IT professional for larger law firms, his lifelong passion around natural health and wellness won out, and he shifted gears to become a nutritionist. He further educated himself by going even deeper into the science and biology around epigenetics, lab interpretation, live blood analysis, nutrient support, and physical training to really help transform the lives of the people he works with. So we're looking forward to this conversation, Anthony. So thank you so much for joining us. It's really good to have you on the show.
You're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
We're very, very, very keen to have this conversation with you. We obviously had your beautiful wife on the show as well recently, but we really, really want to dive in and get to know you and the role that you play and all of the beautiful work you're doing in the world. So would it be okay for you to just jump straight in and give us a bit of a backstory, let our listeners know who you are?
Sure, absolutely. And she's the smart one of the two. And I'm not just saying this because she's my wife, but she's one of the smartest people I've ever met. So I'm glad to be part of the Nourish team. But a little bit of my background, which Jonathan, you kind of hit upon. Most of my career, I was in IT, which I loved, and there's always a need for it. I mean, even at home, we have IT issues at home, so there's always something to do. But I always had an appreciation and affinity for the human body and performance. I played a lot of sports growing up, blah, 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 blah. So I kind of, IT was awesome, but I was getting burnt out, I guess you can say. So I started to be a certified personal trainer, which is great. Great background. I help our clients with it, but it's not really my true love. I like working more on the nutrition side and some of the things you mentioned before with the physiology, the biochemistry. Lab interpretation is super amazing. It's really an art to understand how to do that. So in short, I went from IT to gym ownership, which was a huge investment in resources, time, and I took on a partner at that time who had a lot of experience because I didn't have an experience with the management stuff of it. Long story short, didn't really work out. So sold off the gym and started working with Nourish. And at the time, also went back to school to become a holistic nutritionist, and then sat for the boards and board certified holistic nutritionist, and started working with Kirsten. She started Nourish. She started Nourish all by herself. First, she was in the restaurant business, and then started seeing clients, and then just evolved into wellness. So I came on board and started working with clients for, just basic nutrition and supplementation, and nothing near what I do now with the lab interpretation. I really didn't understand too much about the emotional, energetic, epigenetic, even quantum mechanics side of things. And I'm still, we still have a lot to learn, but that I understand plays an enormous role in, overall health and physiology and everything. So as you mentioned, I went back to school, started getting a lot more education on the labs, and identifying patterns that mean things, which is really neat. And I just love meeting with our clients, and I love to educating them on what everything means, because we love our clients. We don't want to work with them for the rest of our lives. So I like to teach them, at least in the future, if they get some blood work done, at least be able to get an idea of what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Great work. And there's so many different ways we can go with this conversation right now, I think.
Definitely. Absolutely. I think the first thing I'd like to kind of touch on is, I think, just to let people know, what is a holistic nutritionist? Because I think the word nutritionist obviously is thrown around a lot. It's everywhere. Everyone's a nutritionist, but why holistic nutrition?
Yeah, really, really good question. And you're 100% right. A lot of these terms are used very loosely or interchangeably, but the word holistic by definition means whole. So what we do is we look at the body as a whole. So in other words, if someone, and I didn't hit upon this, but we can come back around to this. If someone has an autoimmune disease, let's say called Hashimoto's, right? So it's autoimmune of the thyroid. Eventually, they work their way and they end up seeing an endocrinologist, because the endocrinologist is the doctor of all the glands. But what the endocrinologist does is they look at just the body as glands. They don't look at the whole body. You go to a cardiologist, they look at you as the heart. You go to a nephrologist, they look at you as kidneys. So they look at the human being as individual parts rather than the whole body. So holistic nutrition factors in the entire body because it's all connected.
Nice. And what is the what's the biggest benefit of that? I mean, I think, I would like to think that's an obvious answer, but I'd really love to kind of hear it from you, from your perspective.
I appreciate it. I'd love to hear your answer too. But the benefit is, if you look at and no disrespect to the medical community, doctors, they have a lot of education. They understand the body and physiology and biochemistry. They spend a lot of time in school, but what they're taught is to look at the body as a machine, not as a living, breathing, moving organism. Look at the body as a machine. And if something is wrong with the thyroid, let's take that out. If something's wrong with the gallbladder, let's just remove the problem and not really look at root causes, like what's causing the problem, and attack that. It's more addressing symptoms with pharmaceuticals usually, and very rarely, if ever, anything emotionally.
Yeah, and I love that way of thinking and comparing it to really the medical world, because that is the experience we've had personally as well, isn't it? It's the experience a lot of our clients come to us with as well, and it's just not hitting the mark. And it is important to have specialists. It really is important to have specialists, but it's essential that we start looking at what is going on at the root of a lot of these problems that are coming up and that people are facing, and remembering that we, like you've said, is like we are whole beings. Everything is connected. Like we can't fix something over here on our right and think that it has nothing to do with what's happening over here on our left and everything in between. Exactly. Like it just makes zero sense when we look at the world, when we look at nature. Perhaps let's not go too far into the energy realm just yet, but everything's related. And I think the more we can drive that home, the more perhaps people can start to see themselves as a whole being. And I think that's where a lot of healing really starts to happen, because we stop rejecting parts of ourselves.
Agreed. And what I'm seeing, at least here, we have clients all over the world, but the majority of our clients are within the States. Is over the years, I'm seeing more and more people are more open to holistic healing, and understanding that the really what the medical community, and as you mentioned, there's a need for it, and there is a need for medication, don't get me wrong. But they're more open to holistic, and they want to do things more naturally. Where at least here in the States, where conventional medicine excels is traumas. If God forbid you get in a car accident or you cut off a finger, I mean, we're the best at that, but for healing, not so much.
Absolutely. And I think we take that same holistic approach when it comes to stress, or at least that's our big thing, is right. We want to focus on stress from mental, emotional, physical, and obviously energetic point of view, because we are energetic beings. We are connected by energy. And it's important to know that there is no start or end to us as human beings. Everything is like an integrated, connected unit. So it's not about, okay, your problems start here and they're going to end here. Is okay, well, what you're facing could be from numerous things. It could be from past traumas. It could be from the food you're eating. It could be from kind of the physical exhaustion and burnout you're experiencing from, again, not sleeping and working too much. It could be many aspects and facets of why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And healing comes down to energy and helping to heal that energetic body. And that's through that holistic approach, is tapping within, is looking within, is that mind-body connection, is we're looking after ourselves. When that means our mental health, looking after our thoughts, the quality of our thinking, our emotional health, of how we process emotions. Are we actually feeling or more likely,
Yes.
as society has taught us, that we don't need to feel anymore. We can just suppress everything and hold it in, which leads to obviously more problems down the line. And then again, physical as well. Then you've obviously got the poor training, poor nutrition choices, everything that we're putting onto our body, on our physical body, will have an effect as well. And it's all these little things that can happen that start to compound. But I think it's what's important from a holistic point of view is finding your starting point for people, because I think that's the biggest confusion for most people when they're looking to heal is
Right.
I've got all these things going on, where do I start?
Exactly.
And it's overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Everything John literally just
yeah,
said.
it's
Anybody
overwhelming.
listening to that is
Yeah,
just
probably
like,
go, wow,
whoa,
yeah.
it's easier for me to pretend this isn't happening,
Yeah.
take my medication,
Yeah.
or, you know, distract myself and numb myself. So where does somebody start in your eyes?
So it's a good question. You know, Jonathan, you bring up a memory. I don't know if you called me smile there. There's a movie, I don't remember when it came out, but it's called Equilibrium, and it's about, you familiar with it?
Yes,
It's
yeah, I
exactly
love
what
that
you're
movie.
saying. You know, there was, I guess, another world war. I forget this detail, but there's another world war, and man, forgive me, human species realized that we couldn't survive another one, so they come up with a drug to suppress all emotions, right? So exactly what you're saying. Cool movie. But you're right. A lot of people, what we find is they compartmentalize their issues and just stick it in a box over here in their head and just forget about it, and then it festers. And then it festers, you know, because 95% of our thoughts are subconscious, right? So it's going on up there, and what eventually happens, you know, and this is kind of I'll call it the woo-woo, but it's been proven by science. What happens is that energy gets into your cells. And at least with autoimmune disease, you know, the very definition of autoimmune disease and even chronic illness, and I believe everything in the near future is going to be an autoimmune disease, everything. They just reclassified all heart disease as autoimmune disease, all 3-type diabetes is autoimmune. But anyway, that energy gets into the cells, and now your immune system looks at those cells no different than it does a cell infected by a virus or bacteria, and boom, it'll go after it. But to answer your question, so what we find our approach works for us, and it wasn't always this way. This is going to be really interesting. This is what we found was a big missing piece. But what we find works for us and our clients, if they do the work, right? This is the important thing. Just like when if you join a gym, doesn't mean you're going to get in shape unless you go. But what we found works for us is there's 3 areas that need to be addressed. Not necessarily in this order, but one area is the nutrition, of course, right? And that again is very broad. But the nutrition, then we call it the science, which is looking at labs and be able to understand where there's deficiencies and sufficiencies, where there's organs, gland or system dysfunction, and attack that and attack the root cause. And then the biggest part is what Kirsten calls the soul, and that's the emotional traumas and stressors. And you know, we all have them. I mean, let's be real. You know, it can be a physical trauma. A big one, at least for our clients, is childbirth. It's a really big trauma. And then with autoimmune disease, ironically, there's 3 things that need to come together for autoimmune and chronic illness to surface. It's the genes, right? You're born with a gene from your parents or grandparents. Doesn't mean you're going to get that thing, but you have the genetic predisposition, and then leaky gut, and then some kind of trauma or trigger to get the ball rolling, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. So the soul's a big part. Childbirth's a big trauma. A lot of our clients, when they were younger, you know, most of them are dealt with some kind of physical, emotional, sexual traumas, you know, and that stuff is it. And, you know, it's never let go. It's just kind of put in a box up, and that's not ideal. But it's those 3 areas: the nutrition, the science, and the soul, which is just really inherently who you are as a person. A lot of our clients, when they come to us, their identity is completely lost. They don't know who they are anymore. You know, so we help them get that back. Make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. It's funny, we got into the topic of identity, didn't we, when we were speaking to Kirsten on our other episode. So we'll put the link, by the way, to anybody who's listening to that episode as well into this show notes, so you can kind of go and listen to them both and have a little binge. But it was really, really powerful to open that conversation, because I don't believe it's talked about enough. And I think that adding that soul element and really exploring the energy in relation to the body is powerful, and I think a very untapped area when it comes to working with someone, which is surprising given how many holistic coaches, therapists, nutritionists, healers there are out there. So could you shed a little bit more light on how the energy is affecting the body, and then the role that plays in the results that you're seeing with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So, as both of you mentioned, we're energetic beings. I mean, technically, we're made of biophotons. We're light, right? And everything, this is where quantum mechanics come in. Is everything is energy, information, frequency, and light, essentially. And our bodies are no different. What we're finding, and as new research stuff comes out, is our bodies, every part of our body, every cell in our body has electromagnetic frequencies, right? The earth is an electromagnetic frequency, and some people don't get that because, with traditional medicine, if you can't see it, you don't believe it. That's why the energy part of it doesn't really, they don't get that, or it's not taught, or it doesn't exist. But we have energy centers all over our body. When most people are in a fight or flight or sympathetic state, the energy is trapped in their first three energy centers, which are more survival centers. And then the other four centers are more creativity and healing. And that's where they get stuck. Their energy is stuck in their first three energy centers. So, Kirsten's expertise and our other coaches' expertise, and I'm trying to learn more about how I know what happens, but Kirsten and the other coaches have much more expertise on how to help people get out of that stuff. But they work with people to help them shed that experience or get the energy flowing through the other energy centers.
Yeah, one of the common things that we've seen, and personally I've experienced as well, is like you said, it's those survival energy centers, right? That really, I think, well, they all can cause disruption of some kind, of course, but it's very common that people want to work on, the heart energy center and the vision and all of these different things, right? And it's actually survival ones that I believe can be the most disruptive, because that's what starts to send our systems into a bit of a spin. And especially when we're talking about that first energy center, when we're talking about kind of safety and survival at the root, right? And when that's out of whack, that obviously has an incredible impact on our nervous system, right? And it can put us into these shutdown modes or hyperarousal modes. So I'm curious to know from your side, is it do you see that as common in your own clients as well? And if so, what is the physical repercussions that you see the most that perhaps our listeners could relate to and think, oh, well, maybe that's something they need to explore?
Yeah, I mean, do we see that? Just a little background. Typically, by the time a client finds us and starts working with us, they've been through several doctors, tens of thousands of dollars, years. And, something to keep in mind is this. When if someone's sick for, 10, 20 or more years, if you're going to do something naturally, when you finally find the right person that you believe is what you've been looking for, you don't just overnight you're healed. It's I use the example, it's a freight train. So our clients are freight trains coming in. We put the brakes on, but the freight train doesn't just stop; it slows, over time. So by the time clients find us, they had lots of traumas, and even the traumas of working with practitioners that didn't work out. That's a trauma too for them. But by the time they find us, they're in a chronic for fight or flight or sympathetic mode, and the impacts are horrible. You know, the impacts are our bodies weren't designed to be in a chronic, sustained fight or flight state. And essentially, what happens is the body's constantly creating stress hormones. You know, adrenaline, cortisol, epinephrine. And that's okay in little bits, but to be in it all the time is not okay. A lot of people don't think they're in a chronic state of stress because they're in it. They don't have anything to compare it to. They're just in it all the time. They're like, oh,
that was me.
Yeah, but they are, you know. And then what happens over time? I mean, in short, here's I mean, this is a really quick overview of epigenetics. But if you look at epigenetics, so earlier I mentioned that for someone to have an autoimmune disease or chronic illness, there's a genetic disposition, but unless the genes are signaled to express, you know, we do have control, if you will, over whether our body's going to be in disease states or not. Because, you know, you look at a cell, every cell in the body except for red blood cells has a nucleus. Inside the nucleus are chromosomes, and chromosomes essentially are tightly wound strands of DNA, and little snippets of that are genes. So when we have experiences, those experiences create feelings and emotions. Those feelings and emotions create chemistry in the body that's going to make you feel exactly that way, right? So if you have a this is a long answer, so forgive me.
It's good.
That's
Make
good.
sure
Yeah.
if you have a thought, that thought's going to create a chemistry in the body, so that chemistry makes you feel exactly the way you're thinking. Then you're feeling that way, you have more of those same thoughts, it produces more chemistry, which produces more feelings. So it's this loop, whether, and I don't like to use good or bad, but whether those thoughts are, you know, if you have scary thoughts, it's going to create chemistry in the body to make you feel scared. And then that chemistry is going to make you feel scared, and that's going to create more thoughts, and this vicious loop that we get in. And that's why so many people, they're just living in the past. You know, they wake up and they think about their problems, and they're creating the chemistry, and they don't change anything, and then their tomorrow is no different than today. You know, and their body doesn't heal, and they don't see any changes. So a lot of it is, a huge percentage of it is what we're thinking, or our perception of what's going on. So when we're chronically stressed, it's gonna start to say experiences produce chemistry. It's the chemistry that signals genes, right? And those genes, all they do is produce proteins. You know, they're blueprints. They produce proteins, and it's the proteins that determine health or disease. So we all have a gene in us to create tumor suppressing proteins. So if we're having what I call energy draining thoughts, you know, anger, frustration, competition, resentment, you know, resentment essentially is when one person projects their expectations on someone else. That's resentment. Judgment is when someone projects their values on someone else. That's that judgment. So when we have these energy draining thoughts and feelings, it's going to produce corresponding chemistry and signal genes, you know, genes we probably don't want to be signaled, that are going to essentially give us disease. You know, I'm sure you've heard this, two identical twins, same exact genes, right? Based on their environment and their lifestyle and their choices, and some of the things, Jonathan, you mentioned earlier in this call, one of them turns out to be sick, the other one is very successful. Why is that? Because it's their decisions and environment and nutrition, and that's what really determines health. So, you know, the point is, where even if you have a genetic disposition, doesn't mean you're a victim. You do have control over whether genes express or not, and essentially being in a chronic, sustained level of fight or flight, or sympathetic is the technical term for it. it's most likely going to express conditions you don't want to happen.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? How stress lives inside our body. That's where it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily born there. I mean, it can be obviously when we look at things like traumas and, you know, certain defects, but the reality is like we do have control. Like we have some control. And I think it's just so important perhaps to pay attention to this stuff before we get sick, right? This is one of the reasons why we do this podcast and why we do what we do, right? It's because we want to really be more proactive than reactive. But it's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's so important for people to start to realize, like, exactly what you said is like, even if you have a genetic predisposition, I heard it so many times, it runs in my family. I said, okay, just because it runs in your family doesn't mean it's going to happen to you. But because your perception of what you've seen for your whole life has been, oh, everyone in my family's got it, which means I'm going to get it, whatever that is, and you get it and go, see, it's a genetic thing. But it's not. But again, you have that influence to shut those genes off and switch on those genes for healing, and those cells for healing. And I think that's what people need to really start to grasp is you've got that you are the alchemist of your life. You have that inner pharmacy within yourself to heal yourself. You can create or heal disease within your system. But it comes to that fact of the people you surround yourself with, your environment, the thoughts you think, the feelings, your emotions you tap into and you allow in, and the energy you allow into your field as well, and what you put into your body. All these things have an effect on if you're putting your inner environment in the right place to be able to heal itself. And I think that's so important because I hear it so many times from clients, from people who've spoken to for many of the last couple of decades is, oh, I'm eating so healthy, I'm training hard, but I feel like crap. My body hurts. I'm not sleeping well, but I'm eating healthy and I'm training regularly. Like what's going on? And I think that's the biggest thing is people need to stop putting. We need to stop putting nutrition and exercise only as the main thing, as the pedestal, and start to realize that it's part of it, but it's part of a bigger picture.
Exactly.
And one thing I'd love you to kind of tap into as well, in your experience, especially as a holistic nutritionist, is when people do eat healthy, or what they think is healthy, they're eating lots of vegetables, they're eating organic, fresh foods and meats, but they feel like crap. They still feel they feel like their energy's low, they can't sleep properly, but they've been eating healthy, quote unquote healthy, for ages. What would you say to that person who comes to you saying, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, but nothing's working?
Yeah, it's you kind of, I like that shirt, by the way, Jared.
Thank you.
Is that supposed to be your lungs, or is it just energy?
It's the brain.
Oh yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's a nice colorful picture of the brain.
So yeah, I mean, 100%. Earlier I said when we first started working with clients, the emotion was very small, even if at all, a part that we addressed. And then, Kirsten just had such a natural knack for it, and that's really the area that she moved to. And when we work with clients, I'll be straight with you, we have them, before we even agree to work with them, they need to be willing to do some things. They need to be willing to do the work. They need to be coachable. We want to make sure that it's the right fit, because we know that working on the emotional side of things is huge. Frankly, I'd rather someone do a decent job on the diet and exercise and a great job on the emotional stuff. We see, I mean, if you go to a website, you watch any of our client interviews or client testimonials, they all did the emotional work. Now, I'm not saying the thing I mentioned before, like being angry and having those kind of what I call energy draining reactions is necessarily, you don't want to ever have that. I mean, it's part of the human experience. It's just, we don't want to live there. We just want to be aware that we're triggered by this thing and get past it and get our body to spend, like we were designed, more time in parasympathetic or rest and digest, where things heal because you're right, even if you're eating right and you're exercising, but up here is all wrong, you're not really going to get the results you're looking for.
Definitely. And I like what you said earlier about you don't like using the term good or bad, because we never use that, because there's no such thing as good or bad. It's basically what serves you, what doesn't, what's resourceful, and what isn't. And I think that is so key here. Is there is not like emotions are not good or bad inherently. Like, and it's just anger is not a bad emotion. Joy is not a good emotion. It's just it just vibrates on a different energetic frequency, and just makes you feel differently, which has a different chemical reaction in the body. So I think if we can start to understand that whatever you're feeling is okay, but you're, like you said, not living there, not letting it become chronic. Like for me, anger was my chronic emotion. It was for over a decade, I lived in anger, to the point where I developed chronic pain. I developed so many problems in my body. Every joint in my body was hurting. I destroyed every joint, chronic pain in my back. And anger was a huge one that kept compounding that stress and keeping me in that sympathetic response all the time. And it kept creating that chemical response. And it wasn't until I started to connect with that, obviously deal with those emotions, process those emotions, to connect with that mind body, connect with my breath more, to calm down on my nervous system, when things started to shift and change, when that anger started to release, and I started to feel all that pain and that tension start to dissipate. And it was, again, it was all about dealing with the emotions first, is going back and dealing and processing all those suppressed and repressed emotions I've been holding on to, that I didn't realize were there for 10, 20, 30 plus years. And I think that's what we do as well. Then the same as what you do, like you said, is deal with the emotions, process them, complete that cycle that you started so many years ago, to let it all go.
I think something that I think is important for our listeners to hear there is, we all live in an emotional home, right? We all have a dominant emotional state, and more often than not, our dominant emotional state, until we've started to do some of this deeper work, is a lower vibrational frequency, and we tend to then do the deeper work when we've had enough of that lower frequency, right? When we're living in fear, anger, shame, all of those kinds of emotions, right? And I think a lot of people have an expectation, and I did in the very beginning of kind of personal development, of, well, I'm feeling fear, or I'm feeling anxiety, but I want to just feel joy, for example. And there's almost this illusion that we can just jump from one to the other. But actually, it's more like a ladder. It's more like we just have to climb. We have to upgrade our home, right? More often than not, when you're buying your first home, you don't go out and buy like the biggest, grandest home, right? Most people are not fortunate enough to be able to suddenly do that. You'll probably rent somewhere, then you'll get a cheaper place, and then maybe start to upgrade that home. But we need to take that same approach when it comes to our emotions, right? Because like you've said beautifully, is that, essentially our cells are modeling the input that we're bringing in. And if you imagine your cells like children modeling what they're being exposed to, well, actually, would you really treat that child like that? Would you really expose your children, or any child, to those kind of environments and situations in emotional homes? I highly doubt it, when we really get to the bottom of it. But I think we can relate to how a child might react in those situations easier than what we can our own cells in our body, just because it's the way that we're conditioned, right? So exactly. I would love to know if there's anything you'd add to that little analogy that I just randomly created.
Yeah, that was great. You actually sparked a thought. So when we have emotions like anger and frustration and fear and anxiety, 100% bodies vibrate at a lower frequency, and then that makes us more matter than energy, because anything matter vibrates at a very low frequency, and then healing takes a real long time. But when we have those opposite thoughts, if you will, when we feel love and gratitude's my favorite. Because what's interesting about gratitude is usually gratitude is felt after something is accomplished or achieved. So we can actually live in gratitude before the accomplishment, and our body is going to create corresponding chemistry, right? If we feel gratitude and we feel love, our body's going to create the corresponding chemistry and signaling the genes that we want to be expressed. But when we have thoughts of gratitude and love and joy and inspiration, then we vibrate at a much higher frequency, and then we become more energy than matter. And that's where healing really happens. But, you know, it does go back to what we hit upon before with our energy centers. Most people, their energy stuck in their survival energy centers, and it's not, you know, it's stuck there.
Yeah, well, one of the emotions that I'd add to the awesome list that you just shared there is compassion. If we're stuck in those survival states, I think the easy, well, not easy, because it's often like learning a whole new language when we're learning compassion for the first time, if we're in those survival states. But it's definitely, I think, one of the most important emotions to learn to cultivate, especially when we're in those survival states, because compassion breeds safety. Right. If our body feels safe, immediately we create an environment that can actually sustain healing in the first place, can't it?
Yeah, well, actually, with feelings like that, we're signaling the genes ahead of the environment, right? So we're not waiting for like an experience in our outer reality to happen to create, you know, emotions and feelings. We're creating that experience ahead, because the body doesn't care if it's a thought or if it's something that actually happens. It doesn't care. And the same thing with stress as well. We can think ourselves into this whole chemical cascade of stress hormones. It doesn't have to be getting chased by the bear, the, you know, whatever example you use, the lion, the saber-toothed tiger. It's thought alone that can trigger that same chemical response. But you're absolutely right. There are ways, proper English, to trigger the, you know, our internal chemistry without waiting for an actual experience to happen.
Yeah.
There's a question. I want to keep the next question on the subject of energy, but now I want to bring the food into this as well. And the reason why is because it's something that's I realized, well, during my kind of decade of being angry and training crazy and eating crazy.
We dub those the Hulk years.
The Hulk years, yeah, that was my nickname. But I realized I was under that belief system, whereas obviously like fresh fruit and vegetables are good for you. That's what makes you feel good, and burgers and pizzas and all that make you feel crap. And then every time I eat anything, I'd feel that. And I think, okay, the food's affecting me. But then I started to come across other kind of research kind of trying to challenge that thought process, where it doesn't matter what you eat, it depends on the energetic vibration you're living in. Now, I started to kind of test this out by kind of going into those. Yeah, I started to kind of eating in a state of gratitude and compassion, and I was high vibrations, and then eating stuff like burgers, beating, see how that affects me. And then vice versa, of like eating so-called quote unquote healthy food, but from a lower vibration. And I did find, for me, I found that effect is if I was eating so-called unhealthy food from a high vibration, I didn't feel that same digestive stress I used to feel, and vice versa. If I was eating so-called healthy food under a more lower vibration thing, I'll start to experience more digestive stress. So I'd love to get your opinion on that connection between energy and the types of food you put into your body as well.
That's so cool, man. I can't stop laughing because I love when we do like experiments on ourselves.
That's basically our life.
Yeah, we can share our results with people. So a quick story which you'll appreciate. So I mentioned before that Kirsten used to own restaurants. Like when we first started dating, you know, we first started dating, she's like, guess what? I'm gonna open up a restaurant, which is like 100 hours a week, you know. I'm like, great. But anyway, her chef, one Valentine's Day, you know, they would do special menus and stuff for certain holidays. So one Valentine's Day, he's in the kitchen making like a special whatever. Kirsten's in also, and she hears him singing Luther Vandross. So she comes out and it's like, what's going on? And he's like, well, I'm putting love into the food, right? Because he's singing. So yeah, I totally can see why I had that result, Jonathan, because within reason,
Yeah.
if you're eating good food, right? And that's why I said I'd love to hear this. I really do want to hear what your definition of not eating healthy is. But
Yeah.
if you're eating something that is not really typical healthy for you, but you're in a good energy, your body's going to be in a parasympathetic state. When you're in parasympathetic or fight or flight, one of the things that happens is muscle contraction, right? If you look at your digestive system, even every vein, artery, and capillary in your body is surrounded by a layer of muscle. So if you're in fight or flight, it's going to contract those muscles, and 100% makes sense that there could be digestive issues regardless how clean you're eating. And we absolutely have clients that way. Most of our clients, by the time they start working with us, they're not eating at McDonald's or Burger King or whatever. They have a clue with that, but they still have digestive issues because they're still living in fight or flight. So 100% makes sense. But tell me real quick, what if you go off the rails, what that looks like for you?
You don't really
We don't anymore, but used to.
Well, your experiment.
Yeah. So it's off the rails. Basically, would be like big pizza, be obviously desserts, like cake, ice cream, popcorn, crisps, chocolate, all that type of stuff. So that would be awesome. Because, like I say, obviously, I don't believe there is such a thing as healthy or unhealthy food. It's just basically you've got nutritious and you've got non-nutritious. So you've got food that's got nutrients in it and food that pretty much zero nutrients. But I was just interested when I started to come across this science. I thought, okay, that's an interesting concept, because then it brings into, again, not only your energy, but your perception of how you think about food. And then the funny thing is, when I started talking to this back to certain people, they go, so does that mean I can live off burger and pizza as long as I operate at a high frequency? And I said, well, you eat burger and pizza every day, see how long you can sustain that high level frequency for. So it's like you said, it's within certain, obviously, realms. Like if you're eating predominantly resourceful, nutritious food that works for you as an individual, then if you're eating pizza or burger or whatever every now and again, and you're operating from that level of space, your body's going to be able to use it and digest it. But if you're living in that state and you're eating nothing but non-nutritious, low-nutrient foods for a prolonged period of time, there's only going to be so long you're going to keep those levels of joy and excitement and compassion before you start going, oh my God, I feel like crap. It's like, I just want to curl into a ball and not move anymore. So I think it's definitely within reason, like you said, but also again, you've got a common sense as well will dictate. Agreed. Even though, your body can use that food at a high energetic level, but still is going to have a physiological chemical effect over a period of time if you keep eating that at that same level of low nutrient based foods.
I mean, it's I love this part. If someone, like, we all have bad days. Again, we're still human. So if someone has a bad day and they like, screw it, I'm going to eat ice cream. As long as they just they accept that I made a decision, I ate ice cream, I really shouldn't have, but I'm going to be fine with my decision and move on. Great. But if they're guilty and they're beating themselves, then that's not ideal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think it's very underrated, the impact of our state when we are eating, even if we're eating healthy foods as well, the state we're in when we consume, not even just from an emotion standpoint, just from a presence standpoint, and what state your body's actually in. I remember when I was kind of still working in kind of the corporate wellness space, and I was traveling across different countries, a couple of countries like in a week sometimes, so it's constantly on the go, and I was super guilty of eating on the go, like coming off the plane straight into a club, delivering training, eating at my desk while talking to people. I'm full on. And I was in a good emotional state, but I was not present with what I was eating. I was not conscious about how I was breathing. And so by the end of a week like that, I was zonked. I was like out, and I'm like, something's got to give here. And shifting my state and just having that different level of presence and making sure my nervous system was actually capable of consuming food at that time, even though it was healthy food. It's absolutely paramount, I think, that people take that away, because there's a lot out there in the media, and obviously that we all know to some level what's nutritious and what's non-nutritious, but I don't know that it's widely known that our state actually really can affect everything else. And even not necessarily even having digestive issues. I didn't have any digestive issues. I just felt my energy leak, literally a huge power leak, living a life that way. But the reality is life is fast paced, right? Life is busy. People have got responsibilities. They've got busy jobs, and they need to sometimes recognize that once again, they have control, they have some choice. They can stand up and walk away from their desk to eat, or to take a few breaths before they eat. What would you say to somebody perhaps listening to this that is living that kind of busy on the go lifestyle? What are the kind of the biggest return on investment practices maybe that they could adopt?
Yeah, I really don't have much to add from what you said, but you're right. It's all, we all have choices, right? We have a choice to, you know, if someone really believes that if they step away for a few minutes and eat something in quiet or in a better environment, and that's going to make them so behind on their work, whatever, you know, I think they need to shift their thinking, you know, a little bit with that. And with you, it's great to have digestive issues, but that doesn't mean the next person won't have digestive issues. You know, we're all impacted, you know, differently. But yeah, I don't have much more to add, except it's all about, you know, we all have choices that we can make, and sometimes we need to just shift our thinking, our thought process, and set boundaries.
No, boundaries. Oh, that's a whole nother
Oh,
episode. I think.
Yeah. Oh yes.
It's like topic of the month at the moment with clients. So I have to
Is
say,
that right?
yeah, 100%.
Definitely, boundaries such a big one. But if you, based on kind of what you do with clients, if someone is listening to this and they said they wanted to kind of, okay, that one thing they could start doing today to help start their healing journey, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it is, what would you get them to do? What would you tell them? Say, like, one practical thing they could start doing today.
I mean, usually what we start with, the easiest thing, if people aren't already there, that we start with, and we won't work with somebody if they're not willing to do this. It's a dietary thing, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And we can spend another hour on just this alone. Is no gluten or no dairy. Dairy meaning anything from an udder. I happen, and I'm not suggesting this is the way to go, but I happen to be completely 100% plant-based, which means I don't eat anything from an animal with a face or a mother. I eat only plants. That works for some people, doesn't work for other people, because we're all, you know, unique individuals. Kirsten, on the other hand, she's all about the meat, but she does eat lots of plants as well. But well, Kirsten, because, and I didn't even touch upon this, the reason that we both went this direction is she had 2 autoimmune diseases. And what we find is when somebody gets a autoimmune disease, if the root issue is not resolved, they get a second, a third, the immune system just goes after something else. So we have an emotional attachment to this industry because Kirsten was struggled for so many years trying to figure the solution, the piece of the puzzle. But you know, when she's diagnosed celiac, which is autoimmune of the gut, where the immune system goes after the villi and microvilli, here's the advice, right? She's diagnosed from a doctor: don't eat gluten, see you later. That was it, and she's on her way. So, you know, that and no dairy. And I can get into the details if you want me to, but no gluten, no dairy ever. But we could talk about before, if someone has a bad day and they eat ice cream, just be good with it and move on, and take enzymes and charcoal and you'll be fine. But those are the 2 things that we at least recommend people start with. You know, then from there, there's so many emotional things, and that's really where Kirsten comes in. But that's the direction that we point people in, and from there, if they're vegan, vegetarian, if they're paleo, AIP, we can work with them, and respect their eating styles, make suggestions along the way, but no gluten, no dairy, 100%.
I went for a long time of cutting all that out to start healing, obviously healing my gut, because I had a big aversion to dairy, wheat, and gluten. But now the only dairy we eat is usually fermented, so it's like kefir or it's grass-fed beef or grass-fed butter, stuff like that, which is more organic, more natural, and it doesn't affect us in the way that, well, more kind of factory farmed style of dairy or meat does, with all the chemicals and hormones injected into it, which is again another story for another podcast.
So Anthony, while we're on the practical advice route, let's I'd love to, just because we've spoken about it so much, I know you kind of said this is more Kirsten's bag, but emotionally, if somebody's listening to this, because we've spoken about emotion a lot today, what would be, again, the first port of call that perhaps you would pay attention to with a new client that is perhaps struggling when it comes to finding that emotional regulation that's required for good health?
Yeah, Kirsten works with them too, and she does this. Our process is if someone interested in working with us, then I spend a few minutes on the phone with them to see, and I promise I'm answering your question, to see if how we can help. And then if I feel we can, then it's just a quick call. Then Kirsten meets with them to spend a lot of time with them. And what she does is she takes a lot of information, and what she's pretty direct, if you haven't figured that out. Some people can take that as rude, but there's a difference between being rude or direct. We should just straight with people. We don't sugarcoat things. Time's the most valuable commodity, so we're just straight with people. But she finds out what their blocks are. This is what's blocking you from healing. You've been through lots of doctors, whatever, but here's your blocks. Here's your experiences, emotions, traumas that are preventing you from moving forward. And what I kind of hit upon before is, a lot of them seem to be emotional, physical, sexual traumas. Parents were alcoholics or whatever. So she's the one that takes them through one of many. We offer people lots of tools. Here's your tool bag. And it can be anything from frequency healing to tapping, MDR, I forget the abbreviation for tapping. There's many tools that she uses to help people, but it's just identifying what their blocks are and working with them over time, because again, it's not an overnight thing to so they can just shed that particular emotion or feeling that's blocking them from healing.
Yeah,
nice.
It's really important that you mentioned that, because it sometimes does require working with somebody else to actually highlight and uncover especially deep wounds and deep rooted emotion, and sometimes we're too close to our own stuff to be able to actually see it. But obviously I know as well for our listeners, and it was for me in the beginning as well, it's actually sometimes very hard to actually reach out if you are under a lot of emotional distress, especially if you can't articulate what it is you're experiencing. So if there is anybody listening to this that perhaps is feeling that way, one of the first things I just recommend to start with is just try and identify, what are you feeling? What is the emotion? And if you can't label the name of the emotion, what is the sensation? Do you feel heat in a certain area? Do you feel tingles somewhere in your body? What is it? What can you start to pinpoint? Because as that awareness starts to arise, then you can start to communicate that to somebody with the expertise to be able to help you then really unroot it in a safe and healthy way. So I just wanted to throw that in there, obviously, for our listeners, because I think it's an important place to start.
I love that.
Was you about to ask something before I?
No. No, there's definitely many more ways we can take this conversation. Absolutely. Definitely, I think we'd have to get you on again. We're going to get you and Kirsten together next
That'd
time.
be cool. Yeah,
Power couple.
that'd
I
be
love
great.
that.
Have we had a
Power
couple?
couple to power couple.
We've had one couple so far on the show. It would be great to have, like, we feel very aligned with, because what we do, because we know you yourself and Kirsten do a 12-month program as well.
There's a lot of synergy.
There's a lot of synergy between kind of what we both do. So it would definitely be great to get you both on together the next time and go even deeper. But before we kind of wrap everything up and obviously let people know where they can find you, is there anything else that you feel our listeners need to hear from you? Any kind of like last words of wisdom, anything you want to share before we finish up?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the answer is out there for everyone. You know, with our clients, we need them to surrender to the process. Of course, what we do has to be in alignment with their beliefs and feelings and emotions as well. But you know, we can be the best, absolute best practitioner in the world, but if you don't feel good with our process, it's not going to work for you. So, but I believe the answers are out there. You know, it may not be us. You know, and if you do connect with someone that you feel good alignment with, then just surrender to the process.
Surrender.
Nice.
That's another big topic, isn't it? Right, Anthony, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. No doubt our listeners will love this conversation. We have, and we always learn from these conversations as well. We're so grateful to be able to connect with people like yourself, like Kirsten as well, and to hear all the good work that you're doing in the world and the lives that you're changing as a result of it. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Where can our listeners find you?
Sure, I appreciate all that. You can go to our website. It's nourish123, the numbers, nourish123.com. And there's lots of information. I mentioned before, there's lots of client interviews. You know, check it out. We just redid our website. It came out phenomenal. And I appreciate the opportunity. You're like us, just the other side of the world, and it would be really awesome to have the four of us in the near future on a show.
That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Definitely. We'll set it up.
We'll set it up, definitely.
Yeah,
and we put obviously all your links in the show notes as well. And anyone listening, put Kirsten's link in there so you can also listen to the other half of this power couple as well before we get them on together.
That's it, exactly.
Cool. Very cool. And then I gave you that 9 activator report if you want to share that also. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this and really appreciate the opportunity.
Amazing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been great to have you on. It's been great speaking with you, and I really loved today's conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.